Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, May 14th, 2024, regular closed session meeting of the East Bay MUD Board of Directors. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Director Chan?
Present.
Director Gomez?
Present.
Director Katz has not arrived. Director Linney?
Here.
Director Patterson?
Present.
Director Young?
Here.
President McIntosh?
Here. That moves us to public comment. Oh, excuse me. If members of the public are online and wish to speak on agenda or non-agenda items, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Comments on non-agenda items will be heard now. Comments on agenda items will be heard when the item is up for consideration. Madam Secretary, are there any public comments? I have 2 cards for in-house.
No hands online for public comment?
Okay, all right. That moves us to our speakers here in the room. We first have Yvette Rivera, and this is, you're correction of the agenda?
Just for my item, I think that you can see that on the agenda, it says Yvette Rivera et al. It's the federal civil rights lawsuit that I turned into the federal court on April the 25th, 2024. The agenda says it's Yvette Rivera et al., and it's not Yvette Rivera et al. It's just Yvette Rivera. And I provided you a copy of the document and Risha for the public record, and it's the complaint for retaliation, employment discrimination, hostile work environment, damages, injunctive relief, and declaratory relief for violation of individual civil rights with supplemental state law claims. And the document shows that I'm pro se and that I'm the only plaintiff. I'm sorry if there was any confusion because I left the parentheses around the S after plaintiff. So it's just one plaintiff. It isn't et al. And so that's one item. And the other item was the Saji Pierce and Ariel Bland update. I know the last time I came, I said on May 10th that there would be a hearing on the motion for the plaintiffs, Pierce and Bland's request for, what was it, $4 million, I think, for attorney fees and costs and the whole bit. That hearing didn't happen. The judge instead issued I'm not a lawyer, so I'm just going to say ruling, that he'll make a decision 30 days after the Ninth Circuit rules. So that Ninth Circuit process, who knows if it takes a year, and I don't know if interest is accruing for that time during the Ninth Circuit, but I know that it's probably around $300,000. And of course, I'll be coming back to every board meeting to update the district. Thank you, I yield.
All right. I have Eric Larson. Eric, it says agenda item number 1. But we're going into closed session. You want to speak before we go into closed session? Yeah. Okay. Well, oh, come on.
Thank you, President McIntosh and board members. I did want to take the opportunity to speak, referring to agenda item number 1, which you will be discussing in closed session. During closed session, you'll be discussing upcoming negotiations with the labor unions at East Bay MUD. We're encouraged that we've had early engagement with HR and with management regarding efforts to improve the negotiations process. As some of you have experienced in previous negotiations, negotiations have in the past become quite protracted with little meaningful movement for lengthy periods of time. In fact, I recall coming before you numerous times in 2021 complaining that the district was non-responsive to many of our proposals that we had on the table. So I'm encouraged by the early engagement and recognition that getting an early start in negotiations will be of benefit to both parties. regardless of whether the union or the district brings to the table a large number of proposals. As long as we're ready to roll up our sleeves and get to the hard work of bargaining, as long as the district has the impacted decision makers with the authority to make decisions at the table, we think that we'll certainly make progress. We think there are many issues that can be addressed through interest-based bargaining. And where we get stuck, we think that fundamental to moving items will be to incorporate a third-party facilitator who has no stake in the game and who can help unstick the log jams, facilitate communication, and help keep the parties moving at the table. We're confident that we can be successful at effectively achieving a mutually beneficial collective bargaining agreement with these things in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. All right, there are no more speakers. So the board will now convene to conference room 8 to discuss closed session agenda items 1 and 2, and we're scheduled to return here for our regular meeting at 1:15. Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, May 14th, 2024, regular business meeting of the East Bay MUD Board of Directors. Announcements will be, with regards to announcements for our April 22nd DSR-SD East Bay MUD Recycled Water Authority Board meeting and the April 26th Upper McCullummy River Watershed Authority Governing Board meeting. We will hear those reports as well as this morning's Planning and Ledge HR Committee meetings under item 15. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Director Chan,
Present.
Director Gomez,
Present.
Director Katz,
Present.
Director Lenny,
Here.
Director Patterson,
Present.
Director Young,
Here.
President McIntosh.
Here, please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That leads us to a couple of awards that we have. General Manager Chan?
Yes, the first, I believe, Director Gomez, you're going to introduce.
Good afternoon, everybody. For the past 11 years, East Bay MUD has co-sponsored the Excellence in Water and Wastewater Research Awards in Alameda and Contra Costa counties to recognize outstanding student science and engineering projects. As we face a future of climate uncertainty, it's more important than ever that we encourage these future leaders to innovate new ways to ensure safe, reliable water for generations to come. Today, I have the pleasure of recognizing two of these very bright minds who have displayed tremendous focus and hard work in water science and engineering. We have Sakina Ahmad and Sophie Jackman, 8th graders at Diablo Vista Middle School, whose project, Hydrated Heroes, won an award of excellence. Their project was completed with a single goal in mind: to test different types of water and how they might naturally speed up the growth of plants, specifically crops, to help people that are suffering from food shortages around the world. They tested 3 plants: chamomile, spinach, and basil, and 5 different types of water: microwaved, sparkling, colored water, aquarium water, and distilled water. Guess which one they found to be most effective? So they found that sparkling water generally help plants grow the most. Sakina and Sophie hope that the knowledge collected from this experiment could improve the future study of plant sciences and help food shortages across the globe. Well done, Sakina and Sophie. Your efforts to help put out an end to the global food shortage while also maximizing the use of water is exactly the kind of forward thinking we need in the water world. To recognize your achievement, each of you will be awarded with a certificate and a check for $50. But before I give you this, I would like to welcome you to the podium because I would like to ask a couple of questions, if that's possible. Are you here? Yeah, I know, you guys are like this, I'll have
They
to
are so
stand so I can
adorable. They're
see you.
holding hands.
I know.
Go
I
ahead and
know.
step up.
So step up to the podium, and if it's okay, I just have a couple of questions for you guys. And by the way, I'm so excited to see you here. Thank you for taking time to come and be recognized and for your incredible efforts. But how did you get the idea for this project to begin with?
So we got the idea for this project because we were thinking about, okay, so what are some of the global issues that we have in this world right now? And one of those issues was food shortages. So we were thinking, okay, so people use fertilizers and numerous methods to help increase like the growth of plants and to help these food shortages throughout the world. And we were thinking, okay, so if people can use fertilizers, then does that mean that we can change, by changing like the type of water that's used to water the plants, will that help it grow more?
That's a great way to think. So are you interested in other types of research that you would like to pursue down the road?
Yes, we have a lot of ideas for future science projects that we would both like to try, most of them including water, especially the study of microplastics and how they affect plants and animals.
That sounds
So
exciting.
we were thinking like to add on to this experiment. So we found out that sparkling water helped the plants grow the most, and we were thinking about for the future science fair experiments, like why is this the case, and if microplastics had an effect on this. So like the waters that we mentioned were from local grocery stores. So we were thinking about doing more research about like a natural body of water such as the ocean and what kind of microplastics affect the plants in that ocean, and just basically the study of water and extending on our current science project.
That's fantastic. So what are your plans for high school, and do you guys think you'll continue studying water?
Yes, we definitely think that we want to study water, especially in high school. One focus that like we were saying, we found microplastics very interesting, and we recently came up on a study about microplastics and how they affect humans. So I think we really wanted to try something very similar to that.
Yeah, the science fair was a great, it's a wonderful experience. And this was personally my first science fair. And I thought that it was such a unique experience and very valuable. So we'll definitely do that for the future.
That's fantastic to hear. Fellow board members, do you guys have any questions for our young talent in the room today?
Just keep East Bay Mud at your forefront. We're here to help.
Thank you.
And don't forget, we have great job opportunities.
Yes. We need bright minds for sure.
Thank you guys so much.
Yes.
Impressive.
This opportunity.
So we will have an opportunity for doing a little bit of photographing, but before I come down, I just wanted to thank you for joining us. Congratulations, Sakina and Sophie, and we look forward to your contributions to the world of water and science and engineering, and we hope that you will consider a career in waters. So I will be down and we'll take a couple photos, and let's just give them a round of applause.
And just know too, both of you and your families live in Director Gomez's ward. So that's why she's playing this huge part.
Thank you.
Remember, Ward 2.
All right, so Sakina, okay, we'll do you first, and we'll do Sophie next. So here is your check.
Thank you so much.
And then you can keep this open and show it with your name. And then hold it with this hand, and then we'll shake hands or something. Like this? Okay. Thank you. All right, and now Sophie. Here is your check. And here is your award. And we'll just hold it together. How about that? And thank you to the family members who are here today.
Can I have both of you?
Yeah, both of
Director
you.
Gomez?
With me? Okay. All right. Perfect. guys. Thank you. Good job.
Congratulations.
Thank you. All right, that moves us to our Government Finance Officers Association.
Yes, so the district has received 2 awards for its fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 budget documents from the Government Finance Officers Association and the California Society of Municipal Finance Officers. So for the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award from GFOA, that's the first award for the past 18 consecutive budget cycles in the last 30 years. The Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada has presented a Distinguished Budget Presentation Award to the district for its published budget document. To receive this award, the district's fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 budget document must meet rigorous guidelines and program criteria as a policy document, operations guide, financial plan, and communication device. 3 independent reviewers from the U.S. and Canada rated the documents, and among the comments were, quote, excellent long-term capital planning, and that the department pages had exemplary program descriptions. The second award is the Excellence in Budgeting Award. For the 7th time, the California Society of Municipal Finance Officers award the district with the Operating Excellence Award in Budgeting. This is the highest level of award offered by CSMFO, and it has the additional requirements that must be met above the typical criteria. The program is designed to recognize those agencies that have prepared a budget document that meets the highest standards. One reviewer stated, quote, 5-star rating for providing a genuine feel for the community the district serves. Wonderful use of photos and maps to aid in the understanding. Want to congratulate the Finance Department team that developed the budget documents, including Bernadette De Leon, Sam Feldman, Nathan Hood, Stacy Johnson, Sophia Skoda, Jenny Tam, and Teresa Wan. Additionally, we'd like to thank retired Rates Administrator Richard Liu for his many years of dedicated service and his support on his final district budget. The budget process is a team effort of department staff, finance staff, and of course, the board of directors. It is this team effort that results in a district budget that is both informative and effective. And if we can have those in the room come up. Director Katz.
Chair of the Board's Finance Committee, it is my pleasure and honor to present to you these awards for operating excellence and the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. Thank you very much for your service and helping our budgets provide transparent explanations to our staff and the public. And the board.
Great, thank you so much.
They head straight out. Oh, that was wonderful. All good news. There are no announcements required from our closed session. That moves us to public comment. If members of the public are online and wish to speak on agenda or non-agenda items, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Comments on non-agenda items will be heard now. Comments on agenda items will be heard when the item is up for consideration. Madam Secretary, are there any online public comments?
No hands online for public comment.
All right, I do have 2 speaker cards and one, Yvette, I see pension of, I guess these are items that are not on the agenda.
Yeah, I'm just gonna have a miscellaneous.
Okay, all right, and then after Eric Larson is item number 8. All right.
Thank you. I came to several board meetings this morning, and I'm just going to recap a couple of things that I brought up. Number one, I mentioned that the closed board agenda item for Yvette Rivera versus East Bay MUD needed to be, I guess, corrected. I did file a civil rights case in federal court on April the 25th, but the agenda says it's Yvette Rivera et al., which means there's more people, and it just should be Yvette Rivera versus East Bay MUD. And for those that are interested in reading it, I provided a copy to the district and the president this morning, or the head of the committee this morning. And it's a complaint for retaliation, employment discrimination, hostile work environment, and damages for injunctive and declaratory relief for violation of individual civil rights with supplemental state law claims. That was number one. Number two, I provided at the planning meeting a couple of documents to the 3 committee members. And the intention was to show the pensions of the employees that retired in the positions of janitor, gardener, meter reader, messenger, and mail clerk, to show that these are the people that I've been told and that I personally know never got job training to promote, or cross-training, or flex staff to fill in for higher paying positions that, for them to get promotional opportunities. I also provided a document from 2014, and it was a document that I wrote to the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, and it had nothing to do with East Bay MUD. It was a case that was labeled Rivera and AFSCME, and it talked about the MOU parts of it that talked about who and what individuals, what employees, what job titles had cross-training that I believed had cross-training opportunities or got wage equity adjustments, and how I felt that may have led to a disparate situation. So that was from 2014, and I brought it up because it's something that I've been bringing up now, and I'm hoping that history doesn't repeat itself. And I knew that the board was going to be meeting with the union because the contracts are going to start all over again, and let's hope that in the next contract that there's equal rights and it's not a negotiated thing. So that was number 2. Number 3 was the Pearson Bland update. I had mentioned earlier that the Pearson Bland case was set for a hearing to discuss the $4 million, I think, that the attorneys wanted. That case, was, I guess I want to say postponed. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not using the right terms, but the judge said, let's wait until the federal case concludes before I make a motion on that. And that's it. That's all I have. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you. All right. There are no more cards for public speakers. Are there any public comments on the consent calendar other than Eric Larson for item number 8? Do board members wish to pull an item from consent? All right, let's remove item 8. Do we have a motion for items 1 through 10?
I'll move.
Second.
All right, is there any further discussion? Questions? All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that's unanimous. Eric Larson, come on up. Item number 8.
Thank you, Director McIntosh, board members. Eric Larson, President, AFSCME Local 444. Wanted to take the opportunity to speak just briefly about the award for the automotive service agreement. Management brought this award to the contracting out committee and discussed the concerns with the union back in February and March. We're happy that this expense is being brought under one single board award, which we feel provides better tracking, management, and cost control, rather than issuing individual POs for every service contract that's going out to these auto shops. Most of the work under this contract is specialty work, such as glass and body repair, which we don't perform. However, some of the work covered under the contract does include the regular and routine maintenance and repair of our vehicles and equipment that is normally performed by our represented classifications, including auto mechanics and heavy equipment mechanics. All of our auto mechanic positions are currently filled. However, we are concerned about filling vacancies, including 2 heavy equipment mechanics, 1 senior mechanic, and 1 automotive service assistant position to help reduce reliance on the contracting out of district services. We did not and do not object to this contract award because the request is the same as was spent last year. But we do want to see those positions filled and look forward to ongoing discussions with management about budgeting and staffing in the next budget cycle to continue to reduce the reliance on contracting out our core bargaining unit work. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. All right, that moves us to determination and discussion.
We'll have to vote on that item.
The vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have a motion for item number 8?
I move.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. There's no discussion?
Motion by Director Gomez, second by Director Lenny.
Yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Thank you, Reach. All right, moves us to ledge update.
Yeah, so first we have Kathy Viatella, our Manager of Legislative Affairs, to provide the legislative update. We have several bills to discuss with you and updates on some other legislative activities. I'll note that the bills were discussed earlier today at the Legislative Human Resources Committee meeting, and the committee unanimously supported staff's recommendation to support all of the bills. Kathy.
Okay, thank you, Clifford. Let me just start my timer because this is a lengthy report and I want to keep track of the time. So good afternoon, President McIntosh and members of the board. It's nice to be back before you. As Clifford mentioned, I am going to present today, that is in our ledge report, a package of bills for support position that were supported by the committee this morning, and then provide an update regarding the connection fees and capacity charge bills that I briefed you on in March. I'll also give an update on legislative matters of interest to the district, and that will include kind of an update on what is happening with respect to the Taxpayer Protection Act initiative that's going to be on the on the ballot in March. I will talk about the water rights legislation, the budget, and I'm also going to kind of preview for you some discussions that are underway about creating a statewide low-income rate assistance program. So those will be some additional topics. So why don't I just go ahead and dive in, and I will walk you through these. Before I do, we had included in our report, because there was a question that came before us from President McIntosh about Assemblymember Pappen and where she was from, because we have a number of bills that she's authored in this packet right now. And just as a reminder, Assemblymember Pappen, Diane Pappen, she represents the peninsula. She's from San Mateo. She's Lou Pappen's daughter. And she is now chair of the Assembly Water Parks and Wildlife Committee. So she has an interest in these topic areas that have a nexus with our operations, and that's why we're bringing these forward. And she just happens to have authored several this year. But also in your packet is a list, or it's a summary memo that we sent out in February that lists the our state delegation committee membership. And I'm happy to walk you through that if that would be useful today, or if you have questions about that list. We provided that list because when the new speaker was sworn into office, he shuffled the deck and he changed some committee assignments and chairs. So for example, Assemblymember Rebecca Bauer-Cahan is no longer chair of Assembly Water Parks and Wildlife. She's moved on to working on other subject matters. Senator Skinner is now chair emeritus of the Budget Committee, and she's now chair of Housing. And there's a couple of others in here that are of note. So let me know if you'd like to walk through these. Otherwise, I can ask questions, or we could just move on to the bills.
What's the pleasure of the group? Okay.
All right, then I shall proceed.
Your ball. Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so first in your package, this is a bill, AB 1798, by Assemblymember Pappen, and this deals with Caltrans, the State Department of Transportation, and contaminated runoff that is impacting salmon and steelhead trout-bearing streams. The bill is sponsored by the California Coastkeeper Alliance, and this is a bill that's really seeking to protect water quality. So what the bill is directing Caltrans to do is work with the State Water Resources Control Board and come up with sort of an environmental permitting process, if you will, that would do 5 pilot projects. One of them would be in Contra, Costa County, to look at ways of intercepting stormwater runoff that is transporting water from our roads and our highways that may carry 6 ppd and 6 ppdq. That is a chemical that's used in automotive tires, and when those tires wear off, that chemical is on the road, and then when it rains, it's transported into the streams and rivers, and it's known to be toxic to aquatic species. So the bill would propose this process that would do these 5 projects, these 5 pilot projects across 5 counties, and actually look at installing biofiltration and bioretention swales to intercept the stormwater runoff and prevent the contamination. So this is a water quality project. The committee supported this morning. This is a way of actually collecting information on the effectiveness of those practices and what they may cost, and that could benefit the district if one of them is within our watershed. So staff recommendation in the committees is to support the bill. Any questions? We have supported similar bills in the past that have dealt with copper and brake pads and other metals, lead in weights and tires, and some other legislation.
Should we vote individually like we did this morning, or just wait until you're done and do one?
What is your pleasure? I'm happy to go either way.
Is there a legislative report?
Oh, Clifford gave it at the beginning.
Oh, I must have missed it.
We, from Ledge HR
Yeah,
this
from
morning?
Ledge HR.
Yeah, we unanimously supported all items, all bills.
I would just wait to have the vote all at once.
Okay.
Okay, then I will continue to proceed. So the next 2 bills, these are bills that are looking to amend the Prop 218 Omnibus Act, which is the statute that implements the amendment to the Constitution, the Prop 218 amendment. And basically specifies requirements for local agencies that levy assessments and property-related fees and charges. So the bills basically are seeking to kind of weigh in right now, as there has been a lot of litigation against water agencies who adopted rates, and in dealing with these issues by weighing in with these policy bills that would amend the act and provide further guidance to agencies, as well as protect against future litigation. So the first one is AB 1827. This one is also by Assemblymember Pappen. It deals with sort of the methodology for setting fees and charges for the higher consumptive water parcels. So the bill is sponsored by Urban Ranch Water District from Southern California, and then California Coastkeeper Alliance. And it makes a clarification in the Omnibus Act that fees or charges for property-related service can include the incrementally higher cost of water service when it's due to higher water usage demand, maximum potential water use, or projected peak water uses. So there's a period of time when you have peak demand, right, during the hot summer months, or any combination of these factors. So it also specifies that those incrementally higher costs of water service associated with the factors I just mentioned could be allocated using any method that reasonably assesses the water service provider's cost of serving those parcels. So it basically is endorsing the approach of using tiered rates. And that these incrementally higher costs associated with these can be allocated either among a customer class or within a customer class or both. And they could be based on meter size, or they could be based on peaking factors. So this is essentially, this addition to the act is declarative of existing law and would help with pending litigation, and it would benefit the district in that regard, and our desire to address the impacts of the higher water users. So this was another one that was recommended for support. So any questions? Okay. Seeing none. The second one is AB 2257. This is by Assemblymember Wilson. And this one is dealing with creating an administrative or an exhaustion of administrative remedies procedure to be included as part of a public agency's rate or assessment consideration process. So basically, this bill is sponsored by Aqua, and it's designed to encourage more upfront communication in the rate-making process between, say, East Bay MUD and our ratepayers, which would be beneficial to both, the ratepayers as well as the district, and limit the potential for litigation risk. So essentially what the bill does is it bars legal challenges unless the challenger first brings their issue before the public agency during the rate-setting process. And it would apply only to agencies that opt into a prescribed set of procedural requirements that are outlined in the bill. So you would have to follow a set of procedural requirements for notification and other things. And then anyone that wishes to challenge our rates would have to do so within a certain period of time. And then what would ensue would not just be sort of sending us a card, there would be a dialogue between those parties and the district to come to some resolution. It would also limit any judicial review to a specified record of proceedings as outlined in the bill. And again, why this is good for the district, it would allow us to respond to and address issues through the rate-setting process, not through the courts per se or at later time, and it would help avoid unnecessary litigation and could actually result in a better product, right, for the district and benefit the ratepayers. There could be some minor cost in setting something like this up because we would have to adopt and incorporate new procedures into our existing process, but those could be offset by avoiding any future litigation. So again, the committee this morning supported the staff recommendation to support the bill. And again, these are bills we're bringing before you, which we have in the past also supported Prop 218 legislation to clarify in the act what is permissible. And back in 2020, there was a bill by Senator Morlock, SB 1386, that confirmed the authority of cities and water agencies to use property-related service charges to fund fire protection, because that had been a question that was being litigated. All right, any questions on that one?
So what's the difference between what we're doing now and what's proposed?
So basically what's proposed is we have essentially a protest hearing, is my understanding. What happens is, we start the process, we have a protest hearing, people send in their protest cards, and we understand, and if we get 50 plus 1, then we can't adopt the rates. And that's it, right? This actually creates a process, it's voluntary, it's not mandatory, where we could decide to set up a set of procedures to allow ratepayers to come in. And if they have challenges or concerns with our methodology or our approach, they can raise those before the district.
Okay, so it's not something that we would, we're not adopting the process right now. We're just saying that water agencies should be able to adopt a process, right?
Correct, it's voluntary.
Okay, all right.
Correct.
And it's beneficial not just to the district, but to the ratepayers as well, because they have clarification
Correct,
as to a process.
right. And it helps avoid future litigation.
All right, if there are no further questions, AB 3023.
Okay, AB 3023, so this is the third bill by Assemblymember Pappen. This is a bill that deals with wildfire and forest resilience and is trying to foster coordination and interagency collaboration around activities to manage and address wildfire and forest resilience as well as grant making. So this is an author-sponsored bill, and basically it would require the California Wildfire Task Force that was created by an executive order and created the California Wildfire Action Plan that was issued in 2021 to work with basically other agencies and entities that have similar activities and programs that are looking at watershed resilience, and to sort of figure out how to leverage all of those different programs and then create a consolidated grant application. So it's really, there's lots of different agencies across the state that are engaged in this issue, and how do you coordinate and integrate those processes and create one single grant application, because many of them are administering different funding sources. So this would help align some of those funding opportunities, and some of them come, as you know, through CAL FIRE, the Department of Water Resources, Department of Conservation, Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Wildlife Conservation Board. And the bill could benefit East Bay MUD through our participation in the Upper McCollum River Watershed Authority, which is currently implementing forest projects plans to improve the forest health in the upper watershed, and that is largely funded by state and federal grants. So it could expand potentially the grants available to UMRWA, and there was a question this morning in the committee, would it have any negative impacts on the grants that UMRWA is currently applying for, and I don't believe so. So we've also, as listed in your report, previously supported several measures that have been trying to facilitate, forest health and fire protection. The last one was a bill that dealt with creating the Good Neighbor Authority program that would allow state and local agencies to work on federal forest lands, and this is just kind of another iteration of that. And there was a bill last year by Assemblymember Conley that was trying to take kind of a more programmatic approach to grant making, which didn't make it through because that bill was held on suspense. So we had recommended support, and the committee voted to take that position. Okay, any questions about this one? All right. And then the last are the validation bills. We bring those to you every year. There are 3 of them. They come out of the Senate Committee on Local Government, which that committee was actually split. It's now just called the Senate Committee on Local Government. It introduced the 3 bills, SB 1515, SB 1516, and SB 1517, which enact the validating acts, and essentially the acts cure minor errors that are made inadvertently by officials of state agencies, cities, counties, or special districts that could potentially undermine, the integrity of municipal security. So this would be beneficial to the district when we issue bonds, and we've always supported these historically. So we recommended a support position in the committee and voted in favor of that. So that completes my presentation of all of the bills that are in the report. And as the general manager pointed out, the committee unanimously voted to support these. So that is the decision before you.
I would like to move that we approve and support all of these bills.
I'll second.
We've got a motion and a second. We have a motion from Director Gomez and a second from Director Chan. And are there any questions, thoughts, comments?
I have a thought, mostly appreciation for staff coming to us and being able to so thoroughly answer all the questions that came up during committee, and just really appreciate you keeping us in the loop with everything. So yeah, no, thank you.
It's my pleasure, Director Gomez.
I'd like to ask questions about the climate bond, but I think we can proceed with the vote first.
Why don't we go ahead and you ask your questions and then we can vote, okay?
Okay, yeah, since we're on your report on legislative matters, I'm interested in if there are developments on the climate bond concept. I've seen a lot of social media calling for movement, but I haven't seen anything that's very specific in terms of a bill in print. So I think it would be really exciting if there was exciting news to share. Not so exciting if it's not news.
I'm not sure if, maybe I can be in the middle. So I was going to provide an update in my legislative updates around the budget, and I'll save that for that. But in that context, when the governor released his May revision, which revises his proposed budget for the fiscal year 2024-2025, I'll just say the outlook is still pretty bleak in terms of the budget deficit. He was asked by a reporter during the press conference about the bonds. And as you know, as I've reported, there's 3 proposals for bonds in the legislature. There's an education bond, there's a housing bond, and there's a climate bond. So it's kind of a 3-way race right now. The Senate is organized in trying to work on a climate bond. The Assembly is more decentralized, but it's also working. There are bills in the Assembly and the Senate. But right now, one of the things that was in the governor's May revise, there is reference, although I've not found it, I've been told about this, to an education bond as a way of backfilling some of the cuts to education. When he was asked about the climate bond, he basically said, we're going to maintain our engagement with the legislature and we will see. So originally last year, when we weren't really aware of the significance of the deficit, we were talking about an $18 billion bond. I think that's come down to somewhere between 10 and $6.5 billion. And it remains to be seen whether or not we will have a bond, but it has to be wrapped up by the end of June. And there's fierce competition because there's strong interest in an education bond and housing. And the climate bond, remains to be seen. The governor also pointed out that there's additional federal funding coming in for climate resilience. That may be another factor that weighs into their decision. So it's anyone's guess right now. I wish I had a crystal ball.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to consider and receive recommendations about, are there specific line items that, the district thinks should go into a potential climate bond. Whether or not the legislature passes it, it seems is, a legislative and policy decision that we could advocate for, but there's a lot of different interests going on. But in terms of the technical, what does a climate bond contain? If you think it's worthy of participating in that discussion about what the Senate bill it could look like in a way that would further the district's initiatives, that would be, I think, welcome in the coming meetings.
Yeah, Director Katz, we're happy to do that and continue to monitor and engage. I will say one of the reasons I haven't brought the bond bills to the board for position is I'm always keeping an eye out for something that could be put into the bond that we would not support, right? And so there are some discussions around whether or not to include renewable infrastructure in the bond, which is something that could be financed by other entities, right? So there's just a lot of debate right now and a lot of moving parts. So I want to wait a little bit, but I'll continue to look at that. And we can consider some things just ourselves as an internal exercise that we should be advocating for if we think it's appropriate. So.
Okay.
All right.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to support AB 1798, AB 1827, AB 2257, AB 3023. Did I miss an SB?
15, 15, 16, and 17.
Okay. And validation bills, SB 15, 15, 15, 15, 16, and 15, 17. All right. If there's no further discussion or questions, all in favor? Aye. Any abstentions? All right, it's unanimous.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you. Well, let me just turn to my updates now and other matters. I mentioned earlier about the Taxpayer Protection Act, which if you'll recall, that was last year, that this board took a position and adopted a resolution to oppose that. For those of you that weren't with us last year, and just so you're aware of this act, this is a business-backed measure that will be on the November ballot, which really would redefine what are considered taxes, and then would require a 2/3 majority vote on any new taxes, and it would be retroactive. So fees and things that have been adopted would be subject to this sort of 2/3 majority vote. And this would include any kind of fees or taxes that the legislature passes. So the governor filed a motion with the California Supreme Court to remove this, which is a private citizens initiative, from the ballot because they argued, his administration, that it was too broad to be considered a constitutional amendment and is instead a constitutional revision, which there's a distinction in law, and only the legislature can propose a revision to the Constitution. So the court heard the oral arguments and is expected to come out with a decision sometime in June. So we'll have to wait and see of whether or not this gets pulled from the ballot. But just to remind you, because we are a public agency, we can't now, as this moves closer to November, we cannot take a position on this bill, but others will be weighing in and campaigns will get underway. Okay, is there any questions about that?
I thought we could take a position.
We could take a position on it, we just can't
We
advocate.
can't do anything.
Yes, correct, right,
Yeah.
yeah. So we are registered as opposing it, but we can't do anything, so thank you for the clarification.
I just am wondering about support for that bill. You said it's an individual. Is there any institutional support for that bill?
It's a citizens initiative.
Okay.
And it's supported by the California Business Roundtable. But there are now other business groups coming out in support of it. So it is the business community supporting this initiative.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to touch on the budget briefly. As I mentioned, the governor released his May revise. And basically, he's, proposing just over, it's a 201 billion general fund budget. This May revision was really seeking to address, recent state revenue shortfalls. The revision came out saying revenues are another 7 billion below what they had projected down in January. They took an early action in April to reduce spending proposed in the budget. So now the actual deficit is around 27.6 billion, with ongoing deficits into the future of 30 billion. So those ongoing deficits into the future influence decisions around debt servicing on bonds and the like. So that's another consideration. So as far as East Bay MUD's interests, there are no significant new cuts in the budget. There were, proposed cuts back in January to things like recycled water and PFAS treatment. There is one exception. The May revision did actually cut out of the budget $500 million that was proposed to be available in 2025 to address an inflationary pressures on storage projects that are part of the statewide program for the storage projects that was approved in Prop 1. So those are the sites and the Los Vaqueros projects. They had set aside $500 million to cover inflationary cost increases. That's now been cut out of the budget. So essentially what's going to happen now, there's still not a lot of detail out about what are all of the cuts across the budget, but legislative budget hearings, on the deficit and how they're going to balance the budget will commence tomorrow. And the rest of this week as they start to try to reach consensus between the two houses and then present something to the governor to meet their June 15th constitutional deadline. So we're also keeping our eye out for budget trailer bills. This is the time when budget trailer bills start to come that implement the budget, and sometimes there's policies in those, so we will look for if there's any policies where there's a nexus to the operations of the district that we need to bring to your attention. So that's the budget. So it's pretty grim at the moment, but not as bad as some years past when you look at it as a percentage of overall spending, but it's still a heavy lift. So in terms of the legislative calendar, really policy hearings have slowed down. The Assembly will have its last appropriation hearing on first House bills tomorrow, and then Thursday is the suspense file hearing for both the Assembly and the Senate. And then May 24th is the last day for each house to pass bills introduced in that house, and then we'll move over into the second house and begin the business of the legislature. So in terms of other legislation, just to update you on, we have been continuing to keep an eye on the water rights legislation. So you remember AB 1337 by Assemblymember Wicks that was really addressing the process that they use to curtail water when water's not available to meet a diverter's demand. And then AB 460 by Assemblymember Bauer-Cahan, which was looking to address sort of enforcement issues on some illegal diversions that happened up on the Shasta River last or 2 summers ago, and create a new tool, which is to give the board authority to issue interim or to undertake interim relief, which would be able to actually, it's a new enforcement mechanism. The bill stalled last year in the Senate Natural Resources and Water Committee, and they became 2-year bills. They can be taken up in June and set for policy hearing. They didn't have, I believe, the votes to get out of those committee, and there were unresolved issues. So the opposition and the sponsors of AB 1337 have been talking to see if they can find a path forward, but no such meetings have happened yet on AB 460, and we continue to sort of monitor these discussions and the legislation, and will engage as appropriate, and we'll keep you informed if these are going to move. So any questions about those 2 bills? Okay. I also want to bring to your attention, in late March, there was a very late gut and amend to a bill, AB 2614. This is by Assemblymember James Ramos, that seeks to define tribal beneficial uses and requires that the state board to prioritize tribal beneficial uses over other beneficial uses when updating basin plans to address water quality. That includes both the Bay Delta Plan and then the other regional plans. There was, in 2016, the State Water Board did adopt a definition of tribal beneficial uses, and it has been working with the basins to incorporate those into the basin plans, but on par with other beneficial uses. They're also been slow to implement this, and that may be one of the reasons for the bills, and there's some deadlines in the bills. So this is a bill right now that is going through policy hearings. It will be heard tomorrow in appropriations. We think it may go on to suspense, and we'll continue to monitor it to see whether it has any impacts either on district operations or other statewide policies of which we have an interest. But right now, we're continuing just to watch it. And we're appreciative and understanding of sort of the need to address tribal beneficial uses, and that has been part of the discussion at the Water Board with the update to the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan. But I will let you know that the associations right now have an opposed unless amended position to address this issue of not putting them above tribal beneficial uses, above other beneficial uses, but to put them on par with one another so that the board can consider all of the beneficial uses, and then also to address some of the deadlines. So that's where that is. So any questions about that bill? Okay. So now I want to talk a little bit about this low-rate income assistance program. So Senator DeRazzo has a bill, SB 1255, that we understand will become the vehicle for a low-income rate assistance program. And the sponsors of the bill shared with us the concept for basically creating a program that would put a charge on the water bills and the water and wastewater bills that are co-billed. So we do that, right? We charge for both water and wastewater on a single bill for some of our customers. So basically, there would be a charge on the bills for those two groups to pay for low-income rate assistance programs. And then customers could opt out of the charge if they choose to, not unlike how the community choice aggregation program works. So it's sort of a similar concept. EBMUD has had a seat at the table with these groups and a few other agencies to provide technical input and feedback on how the program could work. And also we've been trying to address our desire to make sure that it doesn't do anything to sort of affect our program in a negative way, that we could continue with the implementation of our customer assistance program, and to see whether or not there's options that we could include into the bill to ensure that we have the option to benefit from such a program. Once the bill is in print, we will then bring it back we'll look at it, we'll analyze it, the impacts to the district, and we will bring that back to the board with a recommendation for a position. But these are ongoing discussions right now, and they're very active. And so I imagine that we'll see the bill in print either the end of the month or beginning of June so that it can be set for a policy hearing in the Senate. I'm sorry, actually I think it will be in the Assembly because I think this is moving through right now. It is on suspense actually in appropriation, so it would be a discussion over in the Assembly. Is there any questions?
It sounds like a great development in this issue area. We've been very interested in seeing additional revenue streams, and it's novel in a sense that we haven't thought about it first and done it first. I imagine that we might actually be able to do something similar without legislative authority, but I'm not sure about that. And I think that would be an interesting question. Do local governments already have the authority to do a voluntary opt-out system? Because to do so without an opt-out provision would require all of the thresholds that the Constitution requires. What I'm interested in, and I think what's of significance in the approach that the state takes, and questioning what our stance would be, is this conceived of as return to source, or is it directing for all types of agencies to collect this revenue and then turn it over to the state for redistribution?
No,
which is it?
It's actually, we would collect it and then we would provide a credit on the low-income customer's bill. Is how
Okay.
the program would
Yeah, I think
work.
that
It would not be returned to the state. There are some reporting requirements that would be on water agencies that choose to participate, that are participating in the program, and then they would have to report to the state on sort of the level of participation, the size of the benefit, and those sorts
Yeah,
of things.
one thing that strikes me as fairly obvious, but, not necessarily to somebody who doesn't think about our billing is, it should be default that we wouldn't automatically opt in customers who are already qualified. So if you've already qualified for our customer assistance program, we wouldn't, I would think that we wouldn't ask that customer to then need to opt out again, and that would be.
Yeah, those are some of the questions around how do we do that and what data would be required. And then how would you do that to carve out a specific group but charge the rest of the customers to pay into this? Does that bring up questions?
Yeah, and our billing system is not easy to reprogram, so compliance timelines, is important too.
Yes, and I've had some conversations, as have my staff, with staff here in the customer assistance program and with ISD, that there would be needed long lead time to set something like this up, to make changes to our system.
But it's more than just reprogramming the billing system. I mean, there's data sharing agreements that would be necessary.
There's data sharing agreements, yes, absolutely, yes.
Agreed.
Yeah, so, whoops. Keeps going, my mic keeps going off. Actually, Andy, just on the opt-out is for people paying to provide the low, you're talking about, you wouldn't want a cap customer having a surcharge to support indirectly their own.
So just
right?
to clarify, the opt-out it's confusing, but what the opt-out means is everybody would automatically have this charge on their bill, and then you would have to choose to opt out.
Right, but including, what Andy's bringing up is that if somebody's already a cap, is a beneficiary of our low income,
They wouldn't be charged.
they wouldn't be charged, so that's another programming thing. The thing that I'm, interested in here is to make sure that, we have a program that is far more generous than pretty much anybody else's. Most agencies don't even have one. Is that this benefit or the subsidy that would be provided for the low income rate, what's the amount that, and maybe you said it and I missed it, but what's the amount that they're talking about?
They're talking about no less than 20% of the customer's bill.
Okay.
With a carve-out, which I still am not sure I fully understand this, I believe there's a carve-out for a certain basic level of water use that would be discounted.
Okay.
So that would be the one that would be subject to this, and then anything over that amount would be charged the normal.
The regular rate,
The
like
regular
what we
rate.
have right now is what we set a cap on, it's only this much, only this much water.
Correct.
But still, even if, with that in place, if it's, like for like or whatever, what our limit is, ours is still much more generous. And we're opting in, care customers to this, are, automatically enrolling care customers into our system somehow with some elaborate data sharing. What would it take, what would be, and I don't know, Andrew, if you've tried to figure this out or not, what would we be looking at in terms of an increase in, an increase in rates to cover it, or what would that charge look like in order to cover everybody that would be eligible? And would we be setting up a, 20% charge, a 20% discount for some people and retaining the 50% discount for others? I think there's some, if you don't have, for a system that doesn't have a program at all, it's a little bit easier to, it might not be welcome for them to imagine it, but it's a little bit easier to, I'm all in favor of figuring this out, and I think the opt-out, sort of the charge idea is a good one. I'm also worried about or concerned about what the percent is of the bill. So is it, if it's a 5, Is it a 2% surcharge, 5% surcharge? I mean, what's the, sort of what's the formula for figuring out, how much the surcharge, would need to be? And whether we could pool the other sources that we use now to cover the program and continue building, building into the fund and not just use the surcharge funding.
I think you called on Andrew
Yeah, and
for that question.
If he
Hang on,
knows.
Andrew. Andrew,
You could also say,
Hang
I
on.
have to come back and tell you.
you can gather that information and come back to us with that, okay? Not today. You don't have to hem and haw and,
And that's fine, so it'll be too early for us to even tell at this
Yeah.
point.
Okay.
Because a lot of it is gonna depending on who is actually East Bay my customer too, right? Because we have to have a way to issue that credit, we need a bill to issue the credit.
Right.
And if we rely on, let's say, the care data, not a lot of, people on care are paying a water bill because they're energy customers. So
Okay.
there's gonna be a lot of analysis that's gonna go
Yeah.
through, we have to do a lot of data comparison.
Right, and it's
But we gotta
typical
start
for
with the-
renters to pay energy bills, but not typical for renters to pay water bills.
but I think just kind of, we'll get back with the
Yeah.
data with more detail. I think just broadly speaking.
we have
if you
two
look-
other items on our agenda that
if you-
might be lengthy.
If you look at our cap customers, we have about 10,000 cap customers. It costs us about a little over $5 million. So if you think we have 330,000 single-family customers, you can quickly do some math, but that makes everything perfect. We'll get a more detailed response, but it's not cheap.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Marguerite?
Yeah, for now. I mean,
Yeah,
I think
so I-
that, it's important for us to be engaged in this. I'd like us to be champions of it, and get to a place where we feel like we can be champions of it and lead the way on it.
Yeah.
All
Okay,
right,
I-
Kathy, are you
So I'm
Done?
essentially done. I think the only thing to mention is it's kind of all quiet, at least on our issues, on the congressional front. So they are starting to take up discussions around 2025 appropriations and a WRDA reauthorization, but it will be a small WRDA package. WRDA is the Water Resources Development Act that funds certain water infrastructure projects, many of them governed by the Army Corps of Engineers. And we asked to increase our authorization from 25 million to 40 million in that act. So, and that's my update.
can't hurt to ask?
It cannot hurt to ask.
Thank you, Kathy. Great job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy. So next is to talk about our retirement ordinance and changes, potential changes. You might recall at our last board meeting, we discussed those potential changes to the East Bay MUD retirement ordinance. Based on feedback from the board, we're bringing a few changes to the ordinance for your consideration. The first change is to the pension benefits for future elected or appointed board members. With respect to how the pension benefit is calculated, there is an option also to eliminate that pension benefit for board members. The second is the change for future East Bay MUD retirees that are elected or appointed to the board. And so Lourdes Matthews, our Assistant General Counsel, will lead the discussion. She has a short presentation that'll help you understand the various options being considered.
Short.
I will try my very best, and you can shut me down if I'm being too verbose, and stop me if you need me to clarify, answer any questions. But anyway, good afternoon. As Clifford said, we're bringing back, we're actually continuing a conversation we had back at the April 9th meeting regarding options to make changes to the retirement ordinance with respect to pension benefits of future board members. Want to make that clear. We're only talking about future board members, not anyone sitting right here on the board right now. So I would like to start just kind of giving you an overview of what I intend to cover today. Next slide, please. Yes. Okay, so just recap the options we discussed on April 9th. Recap kind of the policy considerations that we also discussed back then. Why are we bringing these changes forward? And then after I kind of do that recap, I'm going to talk to you about a new option that Director Katz requested that we explore, and kind of what that would look like and what those changes would mean. And then the next step would be to vote on one of the options that are being presented to you today. And then once you vote on the option, and if the option requires a change in the retirement ordinance, then we will conduct a first reading of an ordinance to amend the retirement ordinance. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to recap, there are two policy issues that we're trying to address. First is the concept of preventing the ability of an elected or official or appointed member of the board of directors from receiving a windfall in pension benefits from the district. And primarily, they would receive this windfall through the benefit of reciprocity. The second policy consideration or problem we're trying to solve is the problem that Pepper created, which requires any retiree who retires from a public retirement system to, if they re-enter service back into the retirement system from which they retired, that they would be required to reinstate into the retirement system, and that would require them to cease receiving pension benefits. Any questions on that? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so before we recap the changes, what do we currently have? Currently, a board member's retirement allowance is based on the years of service, highest compensation, and a multiplier depending on whether you're a Pepper employee or a legacy employee. And you're also eligible for the health insurance benefit based on the number of years of service. To receive 100% of the HIB requires up to 20 years, at least 20 years of service. And then it's graduated. I think it's from 5 to 10 years, it's 25, 10 to 15, it's 50, and then so on. Next slide, please. Okay, so under our current ordinance, under the current language, a board member with reciprocity could result in receiving a retirement allowance that is greater than the amount of compensation they earn as a board member. So reciprocity is a benefit that is offered to members of a public retirement system where basically the highest compensation you earn in one agency could be applied to your pension from another agency. And so for us, if a member comes here and becomes a member of the board, the highest compensation they would receive from the board currently at today's rate is $19,278. But if they had reciprocity and earned $100,000 from another agency, they could apply that $100,000 to the district's, to the calculation of the district's pension by virtue of reciprocity. And then also right now, they're eligible for HIB based on the years of service. Next slide, please. So that's current conditions, right? So recap of the options that we talked about on April 9th. The first option to fix this problem is to exclude future members of the board of directors from the retirement system, thus eliminating the rights of future board members to earn any pension benefits or health insurance benefits. So for future board members, any retirement allowance would be zero, no HIB. This option would also exclude any district retiree from serving on the board, and it would eliminate the need for a district retiree to reinstate into the retirement system. That's option one. Are we all clear? Okay.
Clear, the answer is no.
Okay. Can I help? Is there anything I could do to help you understand or clarify?
I think we all get it.
Okay. Next slide, please. Thank you. Option two that you considered last time was this concept of prorating the accrual of service. To put it simply, you would use some kind of factor of an entire year, let's say 25% of 1 year. 25% of 1 year is 3 months. And so we would amend the retirement ordinance to say that for a future board member, they would acquire service at a rate of 3 months for every year they sit on the board. That translates to they would get 1 year of service for 4 years of sitting on the board, which is 1 term. Now, this would not address reciprocity, as reciprocity would still apply, but it would significantly reduce the benefit for a potential board member who would have reciprocity. It also reduces the board member it would also reduce the retirement allowance of a board member who doesn't have reciprocity. And so I just have some examples on on the slide up there. So for a member without reciprocity who serves 30 years on the board, if they accrue at this 25% rate, after 30 years, they would have earned only 7.5 years of service. And so the retirement calculation would be years of service times highest compensation times a multiplier. And to make it simple and easy, I'm using the legacy multiplier, which is 2.6%. And under this option, a board member would receive $3,759, a pension of $3,759 per year, or $313 a month. Like I said, reciprocity would still apply, but it would significantly reduce the amount of pension that a board member with reciprocity could earn. And so under this same scenario, let's say the board member earned a salary of $100,000 at another agency, not the district, that would still apply. However, even though they had 30 years of service, under this option, they would only receive credit for 7.5 years of service. And their annual benefit then would be $19,500 or $1,650. This also would slow the ability of a board member to earn service credit for purposes of earning an HIB. And so essentially, if you're accruing service at a rate of 25%, you're not going to be eligible for an HIB unless you serve for at least 20 years or more on the board. So that's option 2, which is prorate the accrual of service. Next slide, please. And then at the end of that presentation, Director Katz brought up language in the statutes governing CalPERS, which allowed CalPERS to limit the compensation of an elected or appointed board member or elected or appointed official. And under that scheme or under that statute, the language providing for the benefit basically said, look, your final compensation as a board member retiring from CalPERS cannot be greater than the compensation you received as a member of that governing body. So it effectively eliminates the ability of an elected official to apply the highest compensation they may have earned from any other agency towards their CalPERS pension. Does everyone understand that? Okay. So what would that look like for us? So let's use the board member with a reciprocity, who received the highest compensation of $100,000 from another agency, not the district. Their pension would be calculated, and they had 30 years of service. So their pension would be calculated based on the highest compensation they earned at the district. Currently, that is $19,278. So as you can see on the slide, if they had 30 years, their pension would be based on 30 years, plus that $19,278, not $100,000, and then times the multiplier for the legacy. That results in an annual retirement allowance then of $15,036 or $1,253 per month.
So and they get the legacy multiplier because of their prior CalPERS service.
Perhaps if they if there's reciprocity, or if they were, prior to coming to the district, they were a member of a legacy.
But it had to be if they had legacy.
Yeah, they weren't like
before
a
they
new
came to
member
East Bay
of a public retirement system for the very first time upon entering our system.
Right.
Okay. The other feature about this option, another feature of this option is it would have no effect on eligibility for HIB. HIB would continue to be based on the actual years of service spent sitting on the board of directors. And then if you want clarification, terminal compensation is the highest compensation earned for a period of 2 years for legacy and 36 consecutive months for PEPR members. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so last time I presented you with language that would need to be added to the retirement ordinance to reflect those options. But because option 3 is a new option, I hadn't yet provided that language to you, and that's what we have here. So basically, we would be doing exactly what CalPERS did, which is defining terminal comp in a different way for future elected or appointed board members. And that's what we have here. So notwithstanding any other provision of the retirement ordinance, okay, including but not limited to Section 34, Section 34 pertains to reciprocity. Terminal compensation for a director who is elected or appointed, a director on or after July 1st, shall be based on the highest average annual compensation earnable by the district during the period of service as a director, and shall be applied to any portion of the retirement allowance provided for under Section 15, which provides for the method of calculating a retirement allowance for legacy employees, Section 34, which is reciprocity, and Section 42, which is the method of calculating retirement allowance for PEPRA employees of this retirement ordinance resulting from service as a director. I understand yesterday, Director Gomez pointed out we may be able to be more precise in our language here, and we certainly can be more precise. So really, there should be there's a missing word in this language, and that is notwithstanding any other provision of this ordinance, including but not limited to Section 34, terminal compensation for a director who is first elected or appointed. A director on or after July 1st shall be based on the highest average annual comp. To reflect that this only applies to people who sit on the board for the very first time on or after July 1st, 2024. Thank you for that. Yep. Are there any questions? Yeah.
Are we going to take this as a, because there's the other piece of this, right?
There is
So we're
another
gonna take
piece,
this-
yes.
So
But-
first,
So let me just, next slide, please. Let me just get through my presentation. Okay, so just, you have 4 options. Remember, you have 2 policy issues here that you're considering, right? One is to prevent the windfall. So you have 4 options to address that issue. One is to exclude board members from participating in the retirement system. 2 is prorate service. 3 is to limit terminal comp, as we just discussed. And the 4th option is actually to maintain the status quo, keep everything the same, make no changes. So those are the 4 options to prevent the windfall, to address that policy. Next.
I would like to,
Sorry.
I just want to move on.
So
I know,
since
I
that's
know.
gonna-
Next slide,
she's just
please.
going to go over both issues, and then there's just going to be a quick vote on both.
I
of
thought
the
we were going to
topics.
do them separate, but whatever. I thought we said we were.
The
gonna
vote
do
will be
them
second, but I believe Lourdes is going to call the vote at the end. So
Right.
Is that
Okay.
correct?
I'm getting there.
separate. All right.
Thanks for your patience. Okay,
Just
so the
really thought we
second,
were dealing with them as separate.
you
but
could
equal
do
issues.
that. You could.
Continue,
Before,
Lourdes.
Okay.
I have a technical question about option 3.
Yes.
So I do want to just make sure, it seems that we've addressed the issue of retirees considering becoming a board member in the area that we're about to discuss. But for option 3, I'd like to confirm the application for, let's say we have a district staff member who does not retire, but then becomes a board member.
Yeah, good question.
After the non-retiree member of the system. So I think from the reading, my interpretation, but I'd like your communication to the board about your intent as drafting this for our adoption. My understanding and my intent is for their service as an active member, non-board member, that they would still receive the terminal compensation based on their career service.
Yes.
For example, 20 years of career service, they don't retire, they would receive terminal compensation based on the 2 or 3,
Yeah.
2 years or 36 months for that
Okay.
terminal compensation, and there would be a separate formula for service as a board member based on the board member salary. Did I restate that
Okay,
correctly?
let me make sure I understand. So we're talking about like a member. Let's say an employee works at the district, and then they leave. They don't retire, They leave, they remain in the retirement system. They go work for another agency. They don't retire from our system. They just leave, they leave their money in, and then they come back and they serve on the board. Do I have that correct?
Yes, they may not even
And they're
have a
not
break in-
retired, right? They
Might not
haven't.
even have a break in service.
Right, they don't retire, maybe there's not even, they leave, they work for another place, and then they come back here.
Or maybe
Or
not
not even.
leave.
Well, if they leave, let's deal with the leaving and then not leave. Okay, so let's say they leave, right? Actually, they have to leave because they can't serve serve incompatible offices. They can't serve both as an employee and as a member of the board, so they have to leave
Yeah.
their employment.
Once they're elected, once they take office, before they take office.
But not before.
Right, okay, so let's just, okay, so they leave, they come back, they sit on the board. Maybe there's, right, like you said, there's not even, they don't even go to another place, they just leave their employment. They get
18
elected on the
hours.
board, right, and then they
Act as they
stay.
don't retire.
Right, so there is no, they're considered term vested employees. And so when they are ready to retire, their compensation or their retirement allowance would be based on the highest compensation earned at the district, not as a board member. Because they remained employed, they didn't retire, there's not reciprocity involved, they just came back. So any person who would come back to the retire, so I leave, I don't retire, I come back not as a board member, but I come back as you know, as in another position, or maybe even the same position. I continue, the highest compensation I would receive would be whatever highest compensation I receive from either service, either my prior service in one job or the next service in another job.
No. Well, that's fine, but if they come back and get elected as a director, I don't want them adding to their East Bay MUD salaried position pension in their part-time board member service.
So they would get the years of service from the
Right,
board.
well, it would be the same
They'd
form.
get that.
It would be the same formula.
Yeah.
Maybe a flip ahead to the language that you drafted for this, because I think you did draft it the way that I expected the result and that
Yes.
Director Young
Yes.
is expecting.
Yeah.
I think what you just described is the result currently if we do nothing.
Right.
But when I see the term resulting from service as a director, I see that as
Yeah.
establishing the possibility of multiple formulas where you have the
Okay.
formula from career service and you have the formula
Yeah.
from service as a director.
So this is a change that would affect employees, not retirees, right? We all see that, right? Yeah.
Right.
So because this would be a change that would affect employees, I would not recommend you make any unilateral decisions as to that, you know, because there hasn't been discussion with the unions. This would apply to employees. What you're doing here right now applies to retirees, not employees.
Very different.
No,
Yeah.
but
Very
I'll-
different.
No. But it would apply to people that have left employment. They still have to leave employment before they take office,
Right.
okay? Once they take office, they're not an East Bay MUD employee, they're a former East Bay MUD employee. They are maybe perhaps vested in the retirement system for their employment service as an employee, union or not. And then they are becoming a director at a much reduced salary by even a janitor getting elected to the East Bay MUD board is going to be making far less as a director than they did as a janitor.
Yes.
Right? No shade on our service as directors, but the pension, the
This language
compensation
could
formula.
definitely be construed.
I don't see why it would be
It would be construed,
why
yeah.
it would need to be a union consultation, because they're not employees anymore.
My intent in raising this was both for clarity, but also I think it makes sense to not in light of what we might consider in step 2 of this
Yeah.
discussion, to not have a system that effectively forces an individual to retire. They may not have enough years in their career plan to, or may not be of the adequate age to retire. So
Yeah.
we might be there might be some problems if we don't have clarity about that.
Yeah.
So I think and it's also consistent with the CalPERS scheme that's in state law. So that's why I wanted to raise it and make
Well,
sure.
certainly you can clarify the intent of this language here. I think this language was written broadly enough to apply to any person who becomes a director for the first time on or after July 1st, 2024.
Regardless of their prior
Yeah.
employment history here or
Yeah,
elsewhere.
it could be construed that way.
Or not. It's
Yeah.
the or not that concerns me.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, Lourdes, that, I mean, there's an option, I mean, this language could probably stay the way it is, but the other piece about district retirees can be clarified, that could be a retiree or an employee who has left the system. I mean, what you're trying to capture is somebody who's vested in the system, doesn't retire from the system,
Right.
gets elected, comes
Yeah,
back, works
and then-
25 years at East Bay
right,
Mud, and then
right.
gets the multiplier that's
Yeah.
for 30 years.
Well, again, I just want to be respectful of any changes to employees, and want you to be mindful of that. But you're right, a director isn't a represented member. This would apply only to directors and would only affect director compensation. So
Right,
I think,
it doesn't impact anything, I mean,
Yeah, that's correct. It won't impact employees at all.
Yeah,
It's-
the
it's
way it's
really,
written.
I think what Lourdes is saying is that we think that this language would cover that scenario where a district employee leaves, does not retire from the system, but then is elected or appointed director. We would then calculate their benefits as a director separately. But we'll take a look at that and see if further adjustments to the ordinance need to be made to cover that scenario, because this language does reference other sections of the ordinance itself.
I would agree that this addresses the more urgent consideration, and what I raised is, I think, helpful for clarity, but could be handled on a cleanup timeline.
Yeah, and since this is
the
the
first
I
reading.
don't think
This is
so.
just a
We're
first
talking about a
reading.
turnover of our board happening in November, okay? And we have 1,800 employees, we have many former employees who may have an interest in running for one of the seats that's available. So I do not think it's a cleanup issue. I think it's a clear and present issue that needs to be dealt with within the context of this ordinance. Because I don't want somebody working here for 5 years to vest as an employee and then running for the board of directors and serving for 30 years and getting their pension based on.
Well, I think the
Their salary
language
as an
as
East Bay Mud
this has
employee.
been written, especially when we say, for a director who was first elected, they are no longer in the employee class, they're a
Right.
director class. So I actually think we're okay in terms of the way this was written.
What you first said.
Well,
And the last
like I
clause
said, I
was-
always want to be mindful, when we're talking about employees and changes with respect to employees, I always want to be mindful,
But, and so this is the first reading, so this is your opportunity to provide feedback. I think we understand the concern that you have, and then we'll make the changes and bring it for a second reading with, to address the concerns Director Young and Director Cass has raised.
if needed, yeah.
If the language isn't clear enough.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's needed, but I believe it's either the state law or cases that have applied the state law do give specific reference to scenarios where there could be multiple formulas for a given service.
Yeah.
And I think that's viewed as potentially more common in CalPERS service, but we might want to borrow that language. Either, depending on council's advice about what timeline we would need to do that. And it seems like we're having, we already have drafted language here, and I do prefer option 3. And I think the draft is in pretty good shape, and I look forward to a report back on.
Director Chan.
Thank you. I have 2 questions. I mean, this started out as a discussion about prorating the accrual of service, and it doesn't seem like, actually, we're doing that in option 3. am I correct for
These are
that?
3 distinct options, and
I'm
if you
correct,
pick
okay.
one, you're not picking the other.
Okay,
Yeah,
I got it.
yeah.
I just wanted to clarify. Also, when I'm looking at the language here, I'm not saying anything about the HIB.
Right, because the HIB is not affected by option 3.
So, I mean, I would really appreciate that language. Actually, just a sentence saying that the HIB will remain unaffected or untouched, or the current HIB program applies, because there's a lot of discussion about HIB, and I just think a clarifying sentence would be
Yeah,
helpful.
respectfully, I think
Thank you.
I think it is hard to have that this is the definition of terminal compensation, which it only applies to that one portion of the formula. I agree that for clarity, we need to have a record
Okay.
that makes it clear what our intent is. So
Right.
maybe a whereas clause in our resolution could.
Well, we
could
have an
state that.
ordinance, and I don't think we have whereas clauses in the ordinance, but it
Our
does,
resolution
this makes absolutely no change to a district director's right to earn HIB. There's no change.
I understand that, and that's all we're asking for, is one sentence saying that there's no change. That's all.
And I suggested that maybe our resolution that adopts the ordinance can create a clear record
Right,
about
but
our
we,
intent.
yeah.
Our intent.
But we don't.
Okay, we could bring back an ordinance, we could bring back the ordinance, amending the ordinance to reflect that the intent is not to change HIB for
Yeah, just
for directors, yeah.
entrance,
Okay.
right?
So we need, are you,
Not yet. One more. Sorry. Next slide, please.
Eric, hang on, let Lourdes finish, and then,
Okay, the second policy issue we want to address is this provision in PEPRA that basically requires a retiree who returns to the retirement system from which they retired to reinstate back, and basically undoing their retirement, and they have to cease receiving their retirement allowance. For district retirees especially, they could be impacted, right? Because then they could not serve on the board and at the same time receive a retirement allowance. And so to allow district retirees to do that, to serve on the board without ceasing retirement payments, the solution for that would be to exclude district retirees from becoming members of the retirement system. If they're excluded, they can't reinstate. There's nothing for them to reinstate into because they're excluded from the retirement system. They're not members. And this would allow
give me that
them.
example again, Lourdes.
Yeah. So here's what Pepper would require. Let's say I retire and I come back and I want to sit on the board. Okay. And as a retiree, I'm making $500 a month, hopefully more one day. But when I come back to the board, I have to cease payment of that $500 a month. I have to cease any HIB reimbursement that I'm getting. I have to cease retirement and come back and join. And I'm only allowed to collect the monthly board compensation because I'm now a board member. I'm no longer a retiree. What the fix would be is I retire, I sit on the board, and you have an ordinance that says I cannot be part of the retirement system. Well, if I can't be part of the retirement system, there's nothing for me to reinstate into. There's no retirement system for me to go back to because I can't participate. So I am able to sit on the board and continue to collect my retirement allowance. So that's the second issue that we're trying to solve for, is the problem that district retirees would be at a disadvantage in terms of being able to serve on the board because of this PEPRA provision. Any questions? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is the language that would be affected in the retirement ordinance to allow district retirees to serve on the board without losing their retirement allowance. And again, it is basically effective on or after any person who has been retired for service from the retirement system and who is receiving a retirement allowance and who is elected or appointed to serve as a director shall not become a member of the retirement system nor accrue any pension or health insurance benefit with respect to their service as a director. And that would eliminate any need for them to reinstate.
I guess that levels the playing field. I mean, if you have a board member, for instance, Andy sitting next to me, who was an East Bay MUD employee, who's receiving his pension, a nice juicy one, and I'm sitting here as a board member, and, you know, my stipend is, you know, it's $1,200.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it levels the playing field. I mean, I'm sitting next to Juicy.
This is a hypothetical.
This is
It doesn't,
But Juicy still gets to size,
I have
Juicy
never
still
been
gets
an
the
employee
stipend.
plan of
Well,
service.
yeah,
but
I know, but, which means he gets over and above his current pension, which
Well, he
is-
gets the pension he earned. He gets the
Well,
pension
yeah.
Yeah, it's
he
not
he
any
was
different.
promised. It has nothing to do with his service on the board.
Yeah,
But he can't be a member of the retirement system anymore.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that, actually.
Yeah, it's not any different than, you know, somebody collecting their social security and
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, we have you know, it's a barrier for those individuals who may bring exceptional qualifications to service on the board. So I think
Yeah.
that's an important reason to consider this.
Sure, there are a lot of people out there like that. So I don't think it's a barrier that's going to prevent the board from it being fully represented with the diverse
Well, just
mindset.
to clarify what I
Yeah.
mean is somebody who, you know, may have I wouldn't just refer to it as juicy, but you know, the pension that they built their whole lifetime of financial planning around.
Juicy.
And whatever it may
Hopefully.
be based on the formula in their career, but to replace that with a, you know, less than $20,000 fixed income, I think would discourage qualified retirees from considering service. It would be a very significant difference, and so this just allows service without being just considering service without being a part of the retirement system.
Yeah, no.
So I like that we considered this.
So let me explain how this amendment, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say that I do favor the amendment. I think what we have in place now is just hyper punitive. I just wish the timing was different. I just wish the timing was not right before an election, but that won't stop me from supporting.
Okay. So let me explain a little bit how the juicy amendment relates to the other amendments. If you vote on option 1, you will not need to vote on juicy amendment because it excludes all board of directors. However, if you vote on either options 2, 3, or do nothing, accrual service, terminal comp, or do nothing, you would need to include this amendment.
well, or
Well-
not. I mean,
Or not, yeah, and if you don't, yeah,
right.
right.
So if we don't support option 1, we don't have to deal with,
No, if you support option 1, it obviates the need
Yeah.
for you to consider
Okay.
this amendment.
all right. And option 2,
You would still need to consider this amendment.
all right. And option 3,
Same thing.
all right.
And if you maintain status quo, you would still need to consider this amendment.
All right. We still have Eric wanting to proffer some comments. How close are you, Lourdes?
Okay, let's just go to the next slide, please. Okay, here are the next steps. You're going to vote on the option. Exclude, prorate, limit, or status quo. Then, next slide, please. Next slide, please. Oh, no, before that, I'm sorry. Okay, right, so once you vote on an option, depending on what you vote on, we may need to, and what you vote on requires an amendment to the retirement ordinance, we will conduct a first reading of that amendment. Okay? And then after which, a second reading will be held on May 28th. And the goal is for this for any amendment to take effect July 1st, 2024. Okay, so I'll stop there.
All right, so before we vote, let's hear from Eric.
Thank you, President McIntosh. I had a question and a request. The request is that you protect pensions that have been accrued and are being accrued by employees at the district, and really people accruing pensions anywhere. The question is whether any of these options, if you're not of retirement age, so I have 16 years, I have a bit to go before I'm of retirement age, could I separate from the district, or any employee separate from the district if they're elected to a position, preserving their district accrued pension system and all of the value associated with that until they're of retirement service age. In the meantime, serving as a board under the conditions of the board. So,
Lourdes?
Let me help you out, yeah. Okay. Yes. You have a vested right in the pension that you earn. And so you would, when you become of retirement age, you would be entitled to then retire, and you'd be entitled to the retirement allowance based on your years of service, highest terminal compensation, and whatever applicable multiplier you would have, even if you're serving on the board.
Well, just to clarify, so let's assume the board picks option 3. Your terminal compensation at retirement would be based on your 16 years of service as an employee, and then separately based on your service as a board member. So you would not accrue 30 years of service on your highest terminal compensation, but you wouldn't lose the 16 years of pension benefits.
You wouldn't lose that.
Well, you get the 16 years times your compensation as an employee of the district, and then you'd get whatever, 12 years of compensation. At 12 plus 16, 28
Yes,
years.
and then
So
the-
28 years would be applied in either case, correct?
Correct, but the 12 years would be based on your highest board member compensation.
Right, so you'd have two, but you'd be increasing your, right? Is that right? You'd be increasing your pension as in the first instance and in the second instance
So,
with the years of service, or is it split?
yeah, but I mean, the question that Eric is bringing up, I think, is precisely the concern that both you, Director Katz, and Director Young raised. And I think we understand the issue, and we want to make sure that we will check that the language just address the issue, which is if you leave the district but don't retire, and you come back as a board member and you're still not retired from the system, what I'm hearing from Director Katz and Director Young is, let's say you work another 30 years at East Bay MUD. You don't want your 5 years at East Bay MUD as an employee and your salary, that salary get to apply to your 30 years as a board member. And what Derek is saying right now is the way the pension would be calculated is your 5 years at your salary at East Bay MUD would be calculated based, you get that pension, and then separately, your 30 years as a East Bay MUD board member, assuming you haven't retired from any system, and so would be calculated based on your board member salary. But I think this also gets to the issue that Director Katz raised, which is just make sure we looked at these multiple equations on calculating the retirement. I think we've heard all the concerns. We have to incorporate this into the second reading.
So option 3, let me just tell you, if we can go back to option 3, the slide that shows the language for option 3, okay? No, sorry.
Eric, thank you.
Sorry.
Go slower.
There it is. Okay. So this defines terminal compensation, right, for a director. And so you have an employee who leaves, doesn't retire, comes back as a director. I would say this language would limit the terminal compensation they can apply to their service as a director. And it would be limited to the average annual compensation earned by the director during their service as a director, and shall be applied to any portion of the retirement allowance resulting from service as a director. So I think actually the way this language is written, it does bifurcate the service.
Okay.
Is what we're saying. So you have service as an employee, and then you have service as a board member, and that service as a board member is limited to the terminal comp earned as a board member. It bifurcates the two types of service.
But it's saying, but isn't it, go back one slide. Okay, so if this board member, this future board member served how many years
30 years.
as a board member? Mm-hmm. Okay. This isn't talking about their service,
No.
their prior service.
No,
Okay,
this is just their service as a
So I
board
worked
member.
15 years at East Bay Mud, a salary of $100,000, and, you know, my pension is calculated on that. I leave, I'm still not retired, I leave, I come back as a board member, and I serve for 3 terms, 12 years.
12 years, yeah.
Okay? Does the 15 years and the 12 years get added together back on the years of because does the years of service also, years of service and compensation get bifurcated, both?
Let's look at the language again. The language,
With reciprocity, well, reciprocity doesn't apply to somebody who's in East Bay Mud and then back on East Bay.
yeah. I
Although
see
the
what you're
ordinance amendments essentially would treat the scenario the same, whether or not you worked at East Bay Mud or at another agency and then came to the board.
Right, but I guess what I'm asking is it total years of service that gets multiplied by my
Yeah, I think.
earlier salary and my director salary? Because then you are talking about,
Yeah,
then you are actually, you're,
yeah. I see what you're saying, and I think,
that's like double dipping, really, because
well, what you need to truly bifurcate, right? If you
Yeah.
want to truly bifurcate, like you're gonna treat employee service as one, director service as one. Here, you're addressing, you're taking care of the terminal comp. You're bifurcating the terminal comp here. with
right,
this
but not
language.
the years of service.
Yeah, and I think maybe we need to come back with some language affecting the years of service to contemplate that scenario.
Right, because otherwise, we're really not taking care of it, we're actually increasing
Well,
the
right, that's
windfall.
what yeah.
We're actually increasing the windfall instead of reducing it or eliminating it.
I'm not sure if I'm following, but I,
Well, basically, if the idea is that as a director, so we're just looking at the director side. And maybe we don't care so much if it's another agency that's having to pay for it. But if it's East Bay Mudders, we're paying for it, right, when the person retires. That they have their vested service as an East Bay Mud employee, and then they come back as a director. This relates to how the director portion of their pension gets calculated, but the way I read it was that it would, and I hadn't thought about this before, that it would count their prior years of service in the formula, but it would only use the smaller level of compensation. And I'm like, that's okay. But if it goes both ways, then it takes those years of service as a director and uses those as the multiplier, adds those years of service to the multiplier for the vested employee pension, resulting in the same thing we're trying to prevent.
yeah, I don't read the ordinances as resulting that way, but I hear the concern. I think when I read notwithstanding any other provision of this ordinance, I read that as saving the employees, the members' terminal compensation resulting from their service as a career employee, among other things. And then this clause stands alone to limit terminal compensation resulting from service as a director. That's how I read it. I do think that the language in state statute that clarifies the potential existence of multiple formulas, that might help with interpretation and clarity. But I don't know if that's my reading of it. So I'm open to what council would recommend.
Yeah, why don't I think if the goal is to bifurcate the service truly, service as an employee, service as a director, I think we would need to add a provision in the Retirement Ordinance section that defines district service to kind of preserve, to truly and clearly accomplish, bifurcating that, like separating those two types of service out.
Yeah, I would agree. I
I
think
would
just
need
for clarity, we would need to do that.
Yeah, for clarity, we would need to do that.
So,
So we would say for a director, it would be something like, for a director who first becomes a director on or after July 1st, service, it would, district service shall not mean service earned or accrued as an employee or something to that effect. And only service accrued as a director.
Do they have to wait 5 years to vest?
That was the original.
That's
the original intent of.
And I wish I
not.
had someone here who, and it's my fault because I didn't tell anyone from the retirement system, as to how we treat term vested employees.
Yeah.
They're here.
Yay! Would you like to come up and explain how term vested employees would work? So what happens what do we do when,
If we're bifurcating the two things, they have to vest again, that's the question.
or let's start with what we do,
It's
right?
really
With
not
an
a-
employee who leaves and then comes back.
She can't answer.
In the case of term vested folks, if they rehire, then the vesting they've already have on the books applies to them. In the case, if the person has left and they have vested and they take distribution of their contributions plus interest, then they would have to reinstate and make a purchase of what they have taken distribution of, and then that vesting would count for them.
Okay. So if we were to bifurcate, we would need to have explicit language to separate the two types of service.
I think so,
Okay.
to be clear.
Okay.
I'm open to what you find, but my expectation is that bifurcating could overcomplicate this. But if there's a reason why that is the best way to do it, I'm open to what you come up with. I was thinking that the model that CalPERS has, which is to approach this with two separate formulas, maybe that's what we mean by bifurcation, but it doesn't. It's really just applying the formula for terminal compensation for elected service and calculating that separately from the formula for career service.
Exactly, right.
And I believe your language already does that, but it might be missing a clarifying sentence that the state authorities have.
I think, I actually think the bifurcation of service has to be explicitly stated in the definition of service.
Okay, and maybe our local ordinance has a particular quirk that requires that, so.
Yeah, it does. yeah.
So maybe just to move along, there's enough, I think, comments on this that maybe we have to do the first reading at the next board meeting. But I think what will be helpful, just to hear from the board, just to vote in general on the direction you'd like to go, which is what I'm hearing is, and let me just kind of restate what I'm hearing. There's a preference for option 3. And we like what's in here about limiting the terminal compensation for board members, but we want clarity that there's also a limit on the years of service for your time as a board member. What I'm also hearing is that the additional provision on the retirement ordinance for district retirees not getting reinstated is something that you want as well. And I didn't hear any real changes to that portion. So those two combined, but we have to add some language. If that's the direction the board would like us to go, if you could, maybe vote on that, and we will come back with a first reading with those edits.
So you need a vote on that?
That's the direction you would like us to go, and then we'll come back with a first reading.
Yeah, and then our next reading will just focus on the option and the clarifications that we've made.
All right, so let's talk about, do we have a motion for one of the options?
I already tried to move it earlier.
Excuse me.
Yes.
We have
Three.
We have a
Okay.
hand for public comment before we
Oh.
take action?
I don't have a card.
No, it's somebody online.
Oh, online, okay, all right, let's do it.
The little hand down there.
It's a little hand. Tim McGowan.
Oh, sure.
Tim McGowan, you should be able to unmute your mic.
All right, thank you. Tim McGowan, the employee representative to the retirement board. I do like option 3. I love the direction that you're going. The one thought that crossed my mind as you're talking about bifurcating the service is how that would affect HIB. And again, going to the analogy of someone who worked 10 years as an employee, and then maybe they work, and that would give them about half of their HIB, but then they come work for the board for maybe another 10 years. If those two services are combined, they get a full HIB, but what do you do if you bifurcated it? And maybe that's just a detail that staff needs to work through as they look through what bifurcating would look like. But I guess what I'm proposing is I'd like to see you bifurcate perhaps the service in relationship to compensation, but consider both services together when you're considering HIB vesting. And that's my comment.
Thank you, Tim.
And the original option 3 did separate the HIB, didn't touch it because we were really looking at the focus of the definition of terminal compensation. So we'll make sure that we don't inadvertently touch the HIB if we need to reword option 3.
So we have a motion from Marguerite. Do I hear a second?
For the record, can we restate the motion? Can we restate what the board is deciding to
The
do?
motion is that to support the direction to developing option 3, to clarify how years of service is used in the formula, and leaving it open to whatever bifurcation, blah, 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 you want to do to preserve the original intent to prevent windfall pensions as a result of board service, and to adopt the retiree exclusion from being a director.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. There's nothing further. Please, Lord. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you.
I'm sorry, just one more. As I understand, we are moving forward with the amendment reflecting option 3, and we're also moving forward with the amendment regarding district retirees.
With some of the additional
Yes,
items.
with additional changes reflecting the intent to bifurcate the service. Okay, thank you.
Next, we want to do discuss our.
Tim McGowan, you have your hand up again. Did you have an additional comment on this item?
I'm sorry, I didn't think I had my hand up.
Oh,
How about I lower my hand?
thank you.
Sorry about that.
Okay, next, we have Phoebe Grow, who will discuss our proposed fiscal year 2025 non-Prop 218 rates and charges. There are 2 items for the board's consideration today. The first is to file a report and recommendation on the revisions to the rates and charges, capacity charges, and other fees not subject to Prop 218. And the second is to set a public hearing date for the June 11th, 2024 regular board meeting.
Okay, so I was here last month talking to you about our cost of service study for our Prop 218 rates. Important to note that this is different. This is the process that we undertake every 2 years, or every year really, for our non-Prop 218 rates, but no Prop 218 rates as part of this process right now. But going back about a year ago, we did our Proposition 218 noticing for our FY24 and FY25 rates that are subject to Prop 218, and we did a June hearing for those Prop 218 rates plus this same set of non-Prop 218 rates in June of 2023, adopted all those rates and charges, both the non-Prop 218 and the Prop 218 ones, and then that July of 2023, that set of rates became effective. So that was 1 year's worth of non-Prop 218 rates. And at that point, we also adopted the Prop 218 rates for FY25. So we take care of 2 years of Prop 218 rates in those odd years. And now in an even year, we're just doing 1 year of non-Prop 218 rates. So that's the last thing I'll say about Prop 218 rates. We'll just keep going forward with what we have in front of us now, which is non-Prop 218 rates. So we're here today, May 14th, to file the report and recommendation of the general manager for revisions to water and wastewater system schedule of rates and charges and other fees not subject to Proposition 218 and regulations for fiscal year 25. We're also here to set a public hearing for June 11th for that same set of rates and charges and regulations. On May 28th is a board workshop. That's our mid-cycle budget workshop, but we also have some discussion of the same set of rates within that budget workshop. And then we move forward to that public hearing that we set today on June 11th. Okay, the non-Prop 218 rates on the water side that are updated as part of this process and are in this document are this set of schedules B, C, D, E, F, G, H. There's no I. We rescinded I in 1988. I'm not sure what it was. J and N. K is annexation fees, which are not updated as part of this process and have stayed the same for a little while. These do include, importantly, the most significant ones here are the SEC charges. And similarly in addition, we have Public Records Act fee schedule, real property use application fees, and our recreation use fees. There'll be particularly further discussion of some of those recreation use fees as part of the mid-cycle budget workshop at the end of this month. And then on wastewater, Schedules A and B are Prop 218 schedules, so they're not included here, but then the rest of them you'll see are included as part of this non-Prop 218 process. Okay, in addition to rates and charges, we have updates to 2 regulations. Section 1, which was also updated several weeks ago, but we're just adding a small revision to that to add another definition for renovation. And then a change to Section 29. These will be discussed in slightly more detail at that budget workshop, but that's on water use restrictions to come into conformance with current legislation and regulations statewide. So next steps, as Clifford mentioned, we're setting a public hearing today for these non-Prop 218 rates and charges. We'll discuss these, the same set of rates and charges at the May 28th mid-cycle budget workshop. The public hearing, provided that we move forward as we expect right here, will be June 11th. And then on July 1, all those rates and charges that we would adopt and the June 11th hearing would take effect. Any questions?
Any questions? All right. So we need a motion, 13.1 is to file the report and recommendation.
I'll move.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. 13.2 is to set a public hearing for Tuesday, June 11th, 2024.
I'll move.
All right.
Second.
So, the first motion was April, to file the report and recommendation of the general manager. Who was the second? Bill, all right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the second motion, April?
Yes.
Okay. Who was the second?
I second.
Okay, Luz. All right, we have a motion and a second to set a public hearing for Tuesday, June 11th, 2024, to consider the report and recommendation. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we're unanimous.
Thank you, Phoebe. Finally, in your packet is the general manager report. I do want to note one correction. On page 7 of the monthly report, we stated that on April 4th, at the Contra Costa Mayor's Conference in Danville, that we announced the appointment of the Ward 2 Director, Luz Gomez. It should have stated that we announced that we had 5 applicants for the vacant Ward 2 position, and the board would be making an appointment to fill the vacancy. Other than that correction, I can answer any questions you may have about the report, and that's the end of my reports.
At our places. We will now move to reports and director comments. Are there any? First, are there any comments from the public on these items? Risha, did you give me back the for Reverend Cecil?
It's on your, it's in there.
It's in my where?
It's on your it's the last page of your document.
Bill, you have a report?
Yes.
No, I'm sorry. So you want to do the committee reports first and then we'll do director comments?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get Cecil.
You're gonna adjourn, so that's the last page.
I know, I like to,
You want to do it now?
no, I just want to read
Mix
it,
it up a
Risha.
little bit.
I want to read it. You took it because you said you had to make a correction.
Here it is.
Okay, that's it.
You gotta watch her, she puts everything down.
No, Risha's good.
Yes, you.
All right, so let's do committee reports.
Planning committee met this morning, and we had 2 items. The first item was on the move of the central service yard to a new location on off of Cypress Mandela Parkway, close to the current Adeline Center, and had a discussion about a lot of that related to art and the housing and the architecture, and it's going to be a really sweet new site for us. The second item was on, what was, what?
Standby officers.
Ah, yes, on sorry. Standby officers, reducing the minimum number to 2, which the committee, in both cases, unanimously supported both items. And I think the standby officer question now goes to finance.
All right, Ledger chart. Bill?
Yes, wait a minute. I'm reading the wrong one. Sorry about that. Oh.
Ledger
chart.
Run away, Bill.
And at the bottom of.
We had the DEI update.
Hold on a minute.
It's been a long day.
It has been a long day. They got tangled up. Hold on a sec.
Here's mine. Here.
Okay, this morning we had a meeting of Ledge HR. We received a report from the, wait a minute.
I received staff report for AB 1798.
No. First, we heard from DIS.
Diversity and inclusion.
And I want to make sure this is not quite correct. We heard a report from DIS this morning, which I'm trying to find my notes on it because I got tangled up in something entirely different. Yeah, there it is. Okay. After the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategic Plan update was presented to us by the Special Assistant Manager, Derry Morton. And we went through to find out where we are currently. And it moved through a body of things that started at the entry level and went all the way up to the top, showing all of the actions that had occurred between that time. I think the essence of the report is that we are making progress, that there's definitive results that you can now see, and there's emphasis on any of the areas of concern with remedies to make them go quicker, faster, have the staff maturing to meet the obligation of the district, and to make sure the outreach plan extends into the district boundary so that we're actually hiring people from within the district, which is an added, significantly added contribution to the community at large, because we're putting our money into the district. Also encouraging people to move into the district, because as it becomes, for those persons residing today, more amiable, more affordable, then they don't have to go to the outreach and try to come in. I'm saying all these things, we've gone to great lengths over time. My comment this morning, and I want to make it again for the full body, is that we were moving very slowly in the beginning, and we weren't seeing direct results. That has moved forward, so I congratulated staff on making that happen and us realizing now where we're going. I wanted to say we didn't realize the degradation that was going on in the district in the beginning. And while we were pointed pointing toward D&I, we have to understand related to that is the wealth component and the enrichment component and the affordability component, all of those things and our resources being plowed into the community. This is what overall, not just our agency, but all of them ought to be focused on. And so I point that out to say, I want to thank Clifford and I want to thank Derry and their leadership and the whole staff, because top to bottom, we're looking at things real hard now. And I'm sorry that I didn't find my notes because they were more specific, but that's really the report that came out this morning, and that we will be coming back for more. The second part was the legislative update, and I think we just passed on some of that. We had a hearing, so everybody got to hear from staff and know kind of where we are. Viatella was here presenting our position, and we were favorable to all of those which you passed at that time. That's essentially the report from this morning, and if there's anything I missed.
Oh, you got it.
Did I miss anything?
You got it.
Okay.
We're
All
ready
right.
for DERWA. Director Chan.
Okay, I didn't know I was supposed to do a readout.
Oh, okay.
I have another report.
I saw one.
And then there's UMRWA for Director Patterson.
Yeah.
Do you want to report out to UMRWA?
Hold on a minute.
And then on UMRWA, and then I'll get mine.
Somebody push.
Oh, that was mine.
That's yours. Take that back. I had it all laid out right here. You might be taking too many.
I don't want that first.
Here it is. Thank you, staff, for cleaning up my book and putting it in the place where it normally goes. That's why I couldn't find it.
Is it okay for me to go with
Yeah, I'm sorry.
All right, okay.
It is, it's correct.
This is the report out for DERWA. We held a meeting on April 22nd, 2024 at the Dublin San Ramon District Boardroom. This is what we accomplished during that meeting, as we approved the meeting minutes, the treasurer's reports and investment reports. We presented John Coleman with a proclamation of service from the DERWA Board of Directors. We approved and adopted the fiscal year 2024 and 2025 operating capital budget, and we approved the First Amendment for the consulting agreement with DERWA Interim Authority Manager Richard G. Sykes. So that was what we did.
Yeah, essentially one of the things you need to know about upcountry is this a moving operation up there. And that while we've been in the forefront of leadership in helping and developing the counties, most of which don't have any great economy, so they don't have much money. And the mileage that they've been getting through the state and through the federal government has helped with the reforestation plan, with all of the things that are happening to keep away the wildfires, protection of the watershed. Those have been done pretty much with the strength of EBMUD pulling that together and make an opportunity similar to what I said about D&I. You know, we pulled our rangers out and we contracted with counties. And so that put money into them so they could hire more men and do a dual job. When it comes to looking at the watershed, over 2,000 acres of watershed that are right near Pardee, we have overhauled that to make sure that it is protected and we don't have fires and things that impede the quality of the water. I want to say that because I don't know how much comes back always to you, and mostly we have staff here today, but people need to know the hand that EBMUD has extended up there. And part of our consideration going forward is how we continue that. And with John being gone, I'm here now, and I guess I talk a little bit more than John does. John did work, but he was kind of quiet on the facts. More facts need to come to this body, and I'll be talking to the general manager about that. And I want to thank Michael Cognalaney for his assistance with me too. We got a lot of things going now that we got to keep our eyes on. That's all I'm saying. And we have to be very sensitive in that regard because we're carrying a bigger operation locally. And many of the new directors who have come aboard have brought with them the concerns of this community. So we have to always keep going and balance the act. I wanted to say a little bit more than normal because I've been thrown into a new position. Thank you.
Okay. Let's move on to director comments. Are there any?
I have some director comments also.
Proceed. Oh,
Okay.
let's start with Luz and April.
Okay. So I was fortunate to attend the Aqua Conference for one day. And one of the sessions that I attended highlighted the importance for water districts to start paying attention and create policy regarding artificial intelligence and how any data policies that we have also need to start taking into consideration AI. And so I had a brief conversation with Clifford about this already, and I was pleased to hear that the district is starting to embark. And I don't know if, Clifford, you want to say a couple of words about that real quick?
Yeah, very, very briefly. So we have an internal group working to develop some guidelines for use of AI at the district. We also are looking at putting together a policy for the board to review or consider on AI as well. That we have existing data policies right now, but it certainly hasn't kept up with some of the new technology out there. So we're going to revisit that as well.
Thank you. That's my report.
Okay, April.
I'll just report out really fast. You know, we are in AAPI month, and so last weekend, Clifford and I were at Lake Chabot, and Clifford led a walk. I think it was like a 5-mile hike where he got a chance to talk about AAPI contributions to that area and Lake Chabot Dam. So anyway, after that, there was an event, and I think we showed up pretty well, actually, Clifford, at that event. And Clifford spoke and made comments about AAPI and the API community, so it was a good event. And yeah, thank you, Clifford, for coming.
Welcome.
It was really great.
And I do want to recognize that. I did participate in the walk. I had a little bit to talk about the history, but it was really led by Kelly Zito's staff and Mona Favorite Hill staff. Christina Wong and Sun Kwong really did all the heavy lifting. And so I had a small part in that, but I did participate in the walk.
Yeah, well, the remarks were really good, so I appreciated that. Thank you.
Yes, quickly, I want to touch on two items. One, the most recent, on Thursday evening, there was a presentation, a 3-day presentation, that night with Acts Full Gospel Church of Oakland, Pastor Jackson receiving a national award from the President of the United States for actions in this community. Acts was celebrating 40 years, and I think it's important to recognize that we have been there with them from the beginning, and they have been with us establishing also the Black Chamber. And I made a personal contribution to Acts on its 40th. That's local. At the state level, I attended the Aqua Conference, and I wanted to report on the organization that I'm on the board of directors of, the California Association for African American in Water Foundation. East Bay MUD is not a formal sponsor of this group. I was elected by them, recruited and elected, and went on board. But when they started, they didn't have the capacity that we had here. We established D&I. And so my position was always the same. I encouraged them and gave them guidance and direction, but did not tell them that they could be linked to us necessarily, because we had poured money into and were doing all the things that they were advocating, and that they should apply this to some of the smaller districts where it could be more helpful. Not, as long as they couldn't match what we were doing, they wouldn't bring us anything new. And so there'd been some reluctance, not from Clifford, but from former general managers, to pay a membership. And my suggestion had always been that we could make a contribution to some of the programs they were doing, but not necessarily be a sponsor. They have reached a new height and new level, and they've gotten recognition from Aqua, and they put on a session, and it was a good session. And they have learned and come a long ways. And so Aqua has offered them some assistance, and they're now doing some of the things that I advised them to do. And I'll not be going forward with this organization, because when my term ends with them, I'm out. I don't want to be there anymore, but I've told them I'd help and advise from a distance. But it's an organization on the rise, and I just point that out. I was well received. It looked like every person in the house stood up when I came in. It's a good thing to attend those things. And you have to encourage people. You can't discourage people. Everybody can make a contribution. That's the only way we can go forward. So they are making themselves known and effective, and you'll hear that name again and again. Thank you.
Doug.
Good. I was fortunate to be able to attend, along with Andy and Marguerite, the dedication for the hydrogen facility, new hydrogen facility at the wastewater treatment plant property out there. This is a facility that will be able to fuel up hydrogen fuel cell trucks, long-distance trucks, on our property. It was a great occasion for us to shine a little bit, but also just for, a celebration of cleaner air and a new technology and new opportunities to reduce carbon emissions, and probably even more importantly than that, have cleaner air in the West Oakland area. So it was a great celebration. East Bay Mud did a great job there.
Wonderful. All right, if there are no further announcements, today we will close our meeting in honor of Reverend Cecil Williams, a visionary leader who transformed Glide Memorial Church into a beacon of hope and inclusion in San Francisco. Albert Cecil Williams was born in Texas in 1929, the same year that philanthropist Lizzie Glide broke ground for the construction of Glide Memorial Church. His family decided as early as age 2 that he would become a reverend, and he grew up into a reverend that changed the concept of clergy. Reverend Williams challenged the traditional concepts of clergy by removing all crosses from the sanctuary and opening the doors to people with drug addictions, the homeless, the LGBTQ community, and others. Under his guidance, the church grew from double figures to thousands of members. He fought for marginalized communities. He was one of the first clergymen to take a revolutionary stand for same-sex couples by presiding over their weddings 4 decades before the national movement. He was a fierce advocate for social justice and civil rights, marching in Selma, Alabama with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Along with the Black Panther Party, he formed Citizens Alert, a 24-hour hotline for people who had been harassed or beaten by the police, especially those in marginalized communities. Reverend Williams worked with elected officials and community leaders to combat issues such as racism, nuclear weapons, and apartheid. Today, Glide Memorial Church continues to serve the most vulnerable members of society. Reverend Williams retired as pastor in 2000, but remained the church's spiritual leader and chief executive of its foundation. Before he retired in 2022, he helped Glide raise more than $50 million through annual auctions of lunches. His legacy of love, compassion, and social changes lives on, inspiring a new generation to create a lasting impact in the lives of the most marginalized. In 6 decades of leadership, Williams has realized his vision of a radically inclusive, just, and loving community at Glide, and his work has inspired a new generation of services designed to create lasting change in the lives of the most marginalized. Reverend Williams passed away on April 22nd. We close today's meeting of the East Bay Municipal Utility Board of Directors in honor of Reverend A. Cecil Williams. The next regular meeting, and a letter will be sent to his family on behalf of the East Bay Mud Board of Directors. The regular meeting of the East Bay Mud Board of Directors will be held Tuesday, May 28th, 2024 at 1:15. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, everyone.